Right now, while most Americans are focused on their daily routines, a sweeping piece of legislation is quietly making its way through Washington that could fundamentally change how seniors experience their golden years. The numbers being thrown around sound impressive on paper: thousands of dollars in tax relief, job creation promises, and economic growth projections, but buried deep within this massive bill are provisions that could leave many of our nation's elderly citizens struggling in ways they never anticipated. If you're watching this, chances are you or someone you love is approaching retirement age, or maybe you're already enjoying those well-earned retirement years. What I'm about to share with you isn't being discussed in the mainstream headlines, but it should be front and center in every household across America. Before we dive deep into these hidden changes, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Golden Money for more insights that protect your financial future. The legislation we're talking about is officially called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and it recently passed the House of Representatives with a narrow margin. This bill promises that families stand to gain over $13,000 in take-home pay, and workers could see wage increases of more than $11,000. On the surface, these numbers sound like a dream come true for American families. However, as with most complex legislation, the devil is truly in the details, and those details paint a very different picture for our senior citizens. Let me share with you the story of Margaret, a 68-year-old retired school teacher from Ohio. Margaret worked for 35 years, saved diligently, and thought she had planned perfectly for her retirement. She relies on her Social Security benefits, a modest pension, and occasional help from Medicaid for her prescription medications. Margaret represents millions of Americans who built their retirement plans based on the programs and benefits that have been in place for decades. What Margaret doesn't know yet is how this new legislation could dramatically alter her financial landscape. The first change that will impact seniors involves what appears to be good news on the surface. The bill includes a $4,000 increase in the standard deduction for seniors, with people aged 65 and over seeing this benefit starting in 2025 through 2028. For someone like Margaret, this sounds wonderful: more money in her pocket during tax season. However, this benefit comes with the catch that most seniors won't realize until it's too late. This deduction is temporary, lasting only for years, which means seniors will need to plan for its eventual disappearance just when they might need financial assistance the most. The second change involves Social Security taxation, and this is where things get complicated in a way that most people won't understand until they're sitting across from their tax preparer. While the bill doesn't directly cut Social Security benefits, the way these benefits are taxed could change significantly. The interaction between the new tax provisions and existing Social Security taxation rules creates a complex web that could leave some seniors paying more in taxes than they anticipated, effectively reducing their take-home benefits even though their actual Social Security payments remain the same. Now we come to the third change, and this is the one that should concern every senior citizen and their families the most. The bill proposes to reduce federal support for Medicaid by nearly $700 billion over a decade, with some estimates suggesting this could lead to an enrollment drop of more than 10 million people. For seniors like Margaret who rely on Medicaid to help cover prescription costs, long-term care expenses, or other medical needs that Medicare doesn't fully cover, this represents a potential catastrophe waiting to happen. Think about this in practical terms. When Margaret needs help paying for her diabetes medication, or when she eventually requires assistance with daily living activities, Medicaid has been her safety net. The new legislation introduces community engagement requirements of at least 80 hours per month of work, education, or service for able-bodied adults without dependents, and imposes work requirements for adults without dependents or disabilities up to the age of 64. While these requirements might not directly affect someone Margaret's age, they will significantly reduce the overall Medicaid program's capacity to serve those who need it most. The fourth change involves what's happening to Medicare, and this affects nearly every senior in America. While the headlines focus on tax cuts and economic growth, the reality is that the funding mechanisms for Medicare could be indirectly impacted by the overall budget changes in this legislation. When you reduce federal revenue through tax cuts, while simultaneously increasing spending in other areas, something has to give, and historically, programs that serve seniors often bear the brunt of these adjustments. Let me tell you about Robert, a 72-year-old veteran from Texas. Robert depends on both Medicare and Veterans Affairs benefits for his health care. He served his country proudly and worked in manufacturing for decades after his military service. Robert's story illustrates how These changes create a domino effect. When Medicaid funding is reduced, more pressure falls on Medicare and other programs. When more people lose Medicaid coverage, they often turn to emergency rooms for care, driving up costs for everyone in the healthcare system, including Medicare recipients like Robert. The fifth and perhaps most insidious change involves the long-term sustainability of the entire social safety net that seniors depend on. According to Congressional Budget Office analysis, the bill's effect would lead to the bottom 10% of Americans seeing their household resources reduced by 4%, largely through cuts to federal spending on Medicaid and food aid, while the top 10% would see an increase in their resources. This isn't just about immediate cuts. It's about fundamentally reshaping the relationship between the federal government and the programs that seniors have paid into their entire working lives. Consider the ripple effects of these changes. When Margaret can't afford her medications, because Medicaid coverage is reduced, she might skip doses or try to stretch her prescriptions. This leads to more serious health problems, more expensive emergency room visits, and ultimately higher costs for everyone in the system. When Robert faces increased out-of-pocket costs for his health care, he might delay necessary treatments, leading to more severe conditions that are more expensive to treat later. The Senate version of the bill includes some modifications, such as a temporary senior deduction that would be in place for tax years 2025 through 2028. But these modifications don't address the fundamental concerns about long-term program sustainability. The temporary nature of many of these benefits means that seniors will face uncertainty about their financial future just when they need stability the most. What makes the situation particularly challenging is that many of these changes won't be immediately visible. Seniors won't wake up tomorrow and find their benefits cut in half. Instead, these changes will unfold gradually over several years, making it difficult for people to connect the dots between the legislation passed today and the financial difficulties they might face in 2 or 3 years. The most important thing to understand is that this legislation represents a fundamental shift in how America approaches support for its aging population. For generations, the promise has been that if you work hard, pay your taxes, and play by the rules, there would be a safety net available when you needed it most. These changes challenge that basic premise and could leave millions of seniors facing financial uncertainty during what should be their most secure years. If you're currently planning for retirement, these changes mean you need to recalculate your financial needs and consider building larger emergency funds than you might have originally planned. If you're already retired, it's crucial to understand how these changes might affect your specific situation and to plan accordingly. The resources used for this information include analyses from the Congressional Budget Office, reports from formerly the Kaiser Family Foundation, coverage from NPR, PBS NewsHour, CNN, and official documentation from the House Ways and Means Committee and the White House. All of these sources are linked in the description below, so you can verify this information and stay updated as this legislation continues to move through Congress. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to protecting your financial future. Stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let these changes catch you off guard.